The loud slam of the door echoes in the empty apartment as Rachel holds her child tightly, the tension in the room palpable. Her ex-husband's face is twisted with anger and betrayal as he storms out, leaving her in the dust. She stands frozen in place for a moment, her heart racing. The sound of distant sirens rings through the night, but Rachel doesn't know whether they're for her, for him, or for someone else entirely. She just knows that everything she's worked for, everything she's fought for, is hanging by a thread. She feels the weight of it all, the exhaustion of single motherhood, the emotional toll of the failed marriage, and the uncertainty of her future. This is a breaking point. Her world is about to shatter, and in that moment she knows she will stop at nothing to protect her child, no matter what it takes. The days that followed were a blur. Rachel spent her time working 2 jobs, trying to scrape together enough to provide for her child. Every moment was a juggling act, balancing work, caring for her daughter, and keeping up with the emotional toll of the custody battle. At night, when the world was quiet, Rachel would sit alone in the kitchen, staring at the bills, and wondering if this was the best she could do. She often doubted herself. Could she keep this up? Was she strong enough? But the moment she saw her daughter's face, the weight of the world lifted. For her child, Rachel could find strength she never knew she had. The fight wasn't just for her anymore. It was for a better future, one where her child wouldn't have to face the same struggles. She couldn't fail. Days turned into weeks, and Rachel found herself sinking deeper into the fight. Her ex-husband, Mark, played dirty in the custody battle, using every tool at his disposal. The legal fees piled up, and the toll on Rachel's mental and emotional state became overwhelming. She didn't have time for herself anymore. Every moment was spent focusing on keeping her head above water for her daughter, Emma. Her only solace was when Emma smiled, when she saw the hope in her daughter's eyes. But the nights were the hardest. Alone in the silence of her apartment, Rachel could feel the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her. She was losing herself in the struggle. Yet, she had no choice but to keep going. Emma needed her to fight, and Rachel would fight no matter what. One evening, as Rachel walked Emma to school, a chance encounter shook her to the core. A woman she barely recognized approached her from behind. It was her sister, Claire, someone Rachel hadn't seen in years. The estrangement between them had been caused by old family feuds, but there was something in Claire's eyes that made Rachel pause. Claire had been watching her from afar, quietly following Rachel's struggle, and now she was here, offering an olive branch. But Rachel hesitated. The wounds of the past ran deep, and opening them again felt like a risk she wasn't sure she could take. But Claire had a message. "I can help you, Rachel. I've been where you are. Let me be there for you now." Rachel didn't know whether to accept the help or shut it down, but as she looked into Claire's eyes, she saw the genuine concern and longing to make amends. Could she trust her? Rachel's heart raced as she stood there, frozen in the moment, unsure of how to respond. The memories of past betrayals flooded her mind. But Claire was family, her blood, her sister. Rachel had spent so many years running from the past, but here it was, standing right in front of her. She didn't know if she could take that first step to heal, to forgive, but she realized in that instant that she had to try. For her daughter. For herself. "I'm scared, Claire," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can do this." Claire stepped closer, her hand gently touching Rachel's arm. "I know, but we'll do it together," Claire said softly. Rachel looked at her, searching her face for any sign of deception, but all she saw was sincerity. A part of her wanted to pull away, but another part, the part of her that was tired of running, wanted to give in. For the first time in a long time, Rachel felt like there might be a way forward. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, papers scattered across the surface. Claire had promised to help with the legal fees, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that it came with strings attached. Her sister's support was a lifeline, but it also brought an uncomfortable truth to the surface. Rachel wasn't entirely alone. The silence between them stretched on, thick with unspoken words. Her ex-husband, Mark, was relentless. He had hired a team of expensive lawyers to challenge every claim, every step Rachel took. The pressure was suffocating. Yet Rachel could see a glimmer of hope in Claire's eyes, something she hadn't seen in years. Claire had returned at the right moment, but could Rachel trust her fully? She wasn't sure. The scars of the past ran deep, and Rachel wasn't ready to expose her vulnerability again. But for Emma's sake, she had no choice but to take a leap of faith. The next morning, Rachel woke early to prepare for another grueling day. She dropped Emma off at school and made her way to the courthouse. Every step felt like it was carrying her deeper into the battle that threatened to consume her. As she stood in line at the security checkpoint, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Mark. "You'll never win. I have all the power, and you can't stop me." Rachel's stomach churned. She had always known Mark to be cruel, but this was different. This was a declaration of war. As she walked into the courtroom, she could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. But she couldn't back down. This was about Emma. This was about her future. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and full of people who didn't care about her story, her struggles. But Rachel wouldn't let that stop her. She was ready for whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with the sound of murmured conversations, but Rachel couldn't focus on any of it. Her heart was pounding in her chest. The judge called the case, and Rachel stood up, her knees trembling slightly. Mark's lawyer was already sitting at the table, a smug smile playing on his lips as he glanced over at Rachel. She felt a surge of anger rise up inside her. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was personal. Mark was using every trick in the book to tear her apart. The evidence was stacked against her, her financial struggles, her work schedule, the accusations that Rachel couldn't possibly be the right fit for Emma. But none of it mattered. Rachel wasn't going to let him win. This was about more than just her. It was about protecting Emma's future. She took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage she had left. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself. The afternoon dragged on, and Rachel's nerves were fraying. She hadn't expected this to be easy, but the questions from Mark's lawyer were relentless. He attacked her past, her financial stability, even her parenting. The sting of every word felt like a betrayal. But Rachel's resolve never wavered. She wouldn't let them break her. The judge adjourned for the day, and Rachel felt the weight of it all. She was emotionally and physically drained, but she couldn't afford to stop now. As she walked out of the courthouse, she spotted Claire waiting for her outside. "You okay?" Claire asked softly. Rachel nodded, though her heart felt heavier than ever. She knew the battle wasn't over. But with Claire by her side, she knew she could make it through. She had to. That night, as Rachel lay in bed, the world outside seemed impossibly far away. She thought of Emma, sound asleep in the next room. The thought of losing her made Rachel's heart ache in a way she never thought possible. She wouldn't let that happen. She had to keep fighting. But the exhaustion from the day's battle weighed heavily on her. Claire's words echoed in her mind, "We'll do this together." Rachel didn't know what the future held, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to drift off to sleep, her heart steady, but her mind still spinning. She had a long way to go, but tomorrow was another day, and she would be ready for it. The days blurred together as Rachel continued her fight. Every meeting with her lawyer, every court appearance seemed like an uphill battle. Mark's lawyer was ruthless, constantly digging into her past, finding ways to make her seem unfit. But Rachel knew she couldn't back down. With Claire's help, she gathered more evidence, testimony, and even sought out witnesses who could vouch for her. It was exhausting, but Rachel was learning to endure. Yet, just when she thought she was gaining some ground, Mark made a shocking move. He showed up at her apartment uninvited, demanding to see Emma. "You can't keep her from me forever," he spat. His presence sent a cold wave of fear through Rachel's chest. She had never expected him to show such aggression, but it wasn't enough to make her cower. She stood firm, her voice steady. "Emma is my daughter, and she's staying with me." The encounter with Mark shook Rachel to her core, but she couldn't let him see that. She spent the next few days trying to regain her composure, but each moment was a reminder of how fragile everything was. Emma's safety was paramount. Rachel knew that every action, every word, would be scrutinized in the courtroom. One evening, as she tucked Emma into bed, she couldn't shake the thought that Mark would find a way to turn her life upside down. Claire, who had been staying with her, sensed the shift in her mood. "You don't have to face this alone," Claire said softly, sitting beside Rachel. The words felt like a balm to Rachel's wounded spirit. Claire had always been her anchor, but now, it was more than just support. It was a lifeline in the chaos that threatened to swallow her whole. Rachel knew that with Claire by her side, she might just have a chance at winning the battle. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind. The constant meetings with the lawyer, the paperwork that seemed endless, the mounting pressure. It was all too much. But Rachel couldn't stop. Not now. She spent every waking moment preparing for the custody hearing, diving into her past with a level of scrutiny she never thought possible. There were moments when she felt like she was drowning, but then she'd think of Emma, her daughter's bright eyes, her laughter, and the strength Rachel needed would surface. But it wasn't just the battle in the courtroom she had to face. The whispers from her old life, the rumors about her troubled past, they were all being dug up. The pain of it was unbearable, but Rachel couldn't afford to break. Every accusation against her felt like a betrayal, but she knew she had to stay strong. The moment she faltered would be the moment Mark won. The day of the custody hearing arrived with all the gravity Rachel had been dreading. She put on a brave face as she walked into the courtroom, but inside she was terrified. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took her seat, glancing at Mark, who was already seated with his lawyer. The tension was palpable. As the judge entered, the room fell silent. The legal proceedings began, but Rachel's focus wasn't on the lawyer's words. Her mind kept drifting back to Emma. What would happen if she lost? Could she live with herself if she couldn't protect her daughter? But as the hearing wore on, something unexpected happened. Mark's lies started to unravel. His accusations, his fabricated stories, began to lose their weight. Rachel stayed quiet, letting the evidence speak for itself. The tide was turning in her favor, but she couldn't afford to celebrate yet. Not until the final ruling was made. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally made his ruling. The words fell on Rachel like a wave of relief, drowning out everything else in the room. She had won. Custody of Emma was hers. The weight of it took a few moments to sink in, but then, the tears came. Rachel had fought for so long, and now she had won. But it wasn't a victory without scars. The battle had taken its toll on her, and there was still so much left to rebuild. As she left the courthouse with Emma, she knew the journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She had her daughter. She had her future. And nothing would take that away from her. With the court case behind her, Rachel thought she could finally take a breath. But the fight didn't end when the gavel came down. Mark didn't take his loss lightly, and his bitterness only grew. He appealed the court's decision, determined to drag Rachel back into the courtroom. Each new legal letter felt like a punch to the stomach. Rachel had to prepare herself for another round of endless legal battles. But this time, things felt different. She was no longer just fighting for her own peace. She was fighting for Emma's future. Rachel knew she couldn't let the past define her any longer. It was time to put her foot down and show her daughter that no matter how hard life got, they would always find a way forward. Claire, once again, stood by her, offering words of comfort when Rachel felt she couldn't go on. "You've already won the hardest fight," Claire said, her voice steady. "Now, you'll fight for what's right." The weeks that followed felt like an emotional roller coaster. Every time Rachel thought she was gaining ground, another challenge appeared. Mark's appeals were relentless, and the legal fees mounted. Rachel found herself working longer hours, her exhaustion growing, but every moment she spent away from Emma felt like a lifetime. Emma was her reason for everything. On the rare occasions when they were together, Rachel saw the exhaustion in her daughter's eyes too. The weight of the situation was wearing on both of them. Yet, every night, Rachel would kiss Emma goodnight, and promise her that everything would be okay. She clung to that promise, even when her own faith began to waver. Then, one evening, as Rachel was getting ready to leave for work, Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, will we be okay?" Emma asked, her voice small and vulnerable. Rachel's heart broke, but she smiled and said, "We will be. I'll make sure of it." The weight of their situation became almost too much to bear. Late nights at the office, followed by court appointments, followed by her constant battle to keep a roof over their heads. Rachel started to question how much longer she could keep going. She wasn't just battling Mark anymore. She was battling the exhaustion, the fear, and the loneliness that had started to consume her. One night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel sat alone on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. Claire's voice broke through the silence. "You don't have to do this alone, Rachel." Rachel turned to her, her voice hoarse. "I don't have a choice," she replied, her words trembling. But deep down she knew Claire was right. She couldn't keep pushing herself to the brink without help. It was time to allow others in, even if it meant facing her own vulnerabilities. The next morning, Rachel woke up with a new resolve. She knew she couldn't do it all on her own, but she wasn't alone anymore. With Claire by her side and Emma's unwavering love, Rachel found the strength to face another day. She attended another meeting with her lawyer, feeling more prepared than ever before. This time, it wasn't just about winning custody, it was about securing a future for Emma, one where she could grow up free of fear and uncertainty. As the lawyer outlined the next steps, Rachel felt a sense of clarity for the first time in months. She was no longer just reacting to the chaos. She was taking control. She would fight for her daughter's future, no matter what it took. As the battle for custody continued, Rachel found herself growing stronger, not just in her fight, but in herself. She had started to believe that no matter how hard life got, she could handle it. There were still days when the fear crept in, when she questioned whether she was enough. But those moments became fewer. With every victory, no matter how small, she grew more confident. One evening, as she and Emma sat together, Rachel felt a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't the peace she'd hoped for, but it was enough. She had everything she needed: love, resilience, and hope. As she tucked Emma in that night, Emma looked up and smiled. "Mom, everything's going to be okay, right?" Rachel smiled back, her voice steady. "Yes, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." The day of the final court hearing arrived, and Rachel could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had prepared for this moment for months, but nothing could prepare her for the emotional weight of what was at stake. Emma's future. Rachel had already fought tooth and nail, but this was the moment where everything would either come together or fall apart. As she entered the courtroom, she felt the eyes of everyone on her: her ex-husband, his lawyer, the judge, and even the bystanders. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly, but she reminded herself, this was for Emma. She wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. She was fighting for a future where Emma could thrive, free from the scars of their past. The courtroom buzzed with quiet conversation, but Rachel's mind was focused solely on the task at hand. She would not let fear rule her. She would not let her past define her. This time, she would win, not just for herself, but for Emma. The hearing stretched on for hours, and Rachel's nerves began to fray. Every argument, every accusation her ex-husband's lawyer made seemed to chip away at her resolve. She wasn't the perfect parent, but neither was he. Rachel had given everything to Emma, and yet, here she was, being forced to defend her love for her child in front of a room full of strangers. At one point, she felt her strength waver. But then, she glanced at Emma, who was sitting quietly beside her, eyes wide with a mix of fear and trust. That was enough. Rachel wasn't just defending herself, she was defending the life she had built for them both. Her voice quivered as she spoke, but she found the words she needed. "I've fought for every piece of this life," Rachel said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And I will fight for her, for Emma, no matter what it takes." The moments following Rachel's speech felt like an eternity. The judge called for a short recess, and Rachel stepped outside, her mind racing. She couldn't stop replaying her words, wondering if she'd said enough. Claire, who had been waiting outside, pulled her into a hug as soon as she stepped into the hallway. "You did great," Claire said, her voice soothing but firm. Rachel shook her head, feeling the weight of the uncertainty still hanging over her. "I don't know if it's enough." "It is," Claire replied, pulling back to look at her. "You've done everything you could, now it's just about letting go and trusting that you've done the right thing." Rachel took a deep breath, nodding. "I won't let him take Emma away. Not now, not ever." Claire gave her a reassuring smile. "I know. And we'll be here, no matter what happens." The final decision came hours later, and Rachel stood in front of the judge once again, her heart in her throat. She held Emma's hand tightly as they waited. The room fell silent as the judge cleared his throat, and Rachel's stomach tightened. After reviewing the case, the judge began, "I have made my decision." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and impossible. Rachel's hands shook as she held Emma closer. The judge's voice echoed in her ears, but she couldn't focus on the words. All she could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her chest. And then, the moment that would change everything, the court awards full custody to the mother, Rachel Green. For a second, Rachel couldn't breathe. She looked down at Emma, who was smiling up at her, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of relief and happiness. Rachel felt tears prick at her eyes as she pulled Emma close. They had won. They were going home. The drive home was quiet but peaceful. Rachel looked over at Emma, who was staring out the window, her head resting against the glass. Rachel's heart swelled with emotion. They had fought so hard for this, and now it was theirs. As they pulled into the parking lot, Rachel turned to Emma and smiled. "We're home, sweetheart," she said softly. Emma turned to her, her smile wide. "I knew we would be," she replied, her voice filled with innocence and trust. As they walked into their apartment, Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her. The past year had been the hardest of her life, but now, with Emma by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. Together, they were stronger than anything life could throw at them. Rachel hugged Emma tightly, whispering, "We made it, baby, we made it." Rachel woke up early the next morning, the sunlight barely breaking through the blinds. She lay in bed, watching the shadows shift as the day began. Emma was still asleep beside her, her small form curled up in peaceful slumber. Rachel had fought so hard for this moment of calm, but she couldn't shake the anxiety that lingered in the back of her mind. There were still so many obstacles to face, so much uncertainty. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had won the most important battle. Emma was safe, and they could start fresh. Rachel allowed herself a rare moment of peace, thinking about what they could do next. She made a vow to herself that no matter what happened, she would protect Emma and give her the best future possible. This was the beginning of a new chapter, and Rachel was ready to embrace it. As the days passed, Rachel began to rebuild her life, bit by bit. She started taking on more freelance work, and slowly, her financial situation improved. She'd found a new sense of purpose, not just as a mother but as a woman reclaiming her independence. She'd learned to navigate the complexities of single motherhood, balancing her job with Emma's needs. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Rachel had begun to rediscover pieces of herself that she thought had been lost forever. One afternoon, while at the park with Emma, Rachel met a few other single parents. At first, she was hesitant to join their group, unsure if she belonged. But they welcomed her with open arms, offering support and camaraderie. In that moment, Rachel realized that she wasn't alone. She had a community, and together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Rachel's bond with Emma had only grown stronger. The two of them were inseparable, sharing late-night talks and silly jokes that only the two of them understood. Yet, despite their closeness, Rachel couldn't help but worry about the future. She had been through so much, and sometimes she still felt like she was barely holding it all together. Her thoughts drifted back to her past, to the things she had buried deep inside. Rachel knew that in order to truly move forward, she would need to confront her past demons, the guilt, the anger, the fear that had held her back for so long. One night, After putting Emma to bed, Rachel sat in the living room, staring at the photo of her and her ex-husband, their smiles frozen in time. It felt like a lifetime ago. She knew it was time to let go for good. A few days later, Rachel decided to take a step she had been dreading. She contacted her ex-husband's lawyer to discuss a possible arrangement for visitation. It was a terrifying prospect. The idea of opening that door again, even just a crack, filled her with dread. But she knew it was the right thing to do for Emma. She couldn't keep running from the past. The phone call was brief, but it left Rachel feeling emotionally exhausted. Her ex-husband wanted to maintain a relationship with Emma, but his presence in their lives would always carry the shadow of betrayal. Rachel's mind raced as she hung up the phone, but one thought stood out. She could do this. No matter what, she would always protect Emma, even if it meant facing her worst fears. And that was the most powerful thing of all. The next week was a blur. Rachel juggled work, her new commitments with the single-parent group, and the ongoing process of navigating the visitation arrangements. Every day was a challenge, but every challenge brought her closer to the future she was building for herself and Emma. One night, as Rachel and Emma sat down for dinner, Emma looked up at her face serious for someone so young. "Mom, do you think Dad will come back?" Rachel's heart ached. She didn't want Emma to worry, but she knew that Emma had questions. "I don't know, sweetie," Rachel replied softly, brushing a stray hair from Emma's face. "But what I do know is that we're okay, just the two of us, and we always will be." Emma nodded, accepting her mother's words. Rachel smiled, but inside her heart swelled with love. They had been through so much, but they had each other. And that was all they needed. Rachel sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding in her chest. Her ex-husband's lawyer presented their case, and the air felt thick with tension. She had no illusions. It wasn't just about custody anymore, it was a battle for Emma's future. As her lawyer spoke, Rachel's mind flashed to all the sacrifices she'd made. All the nights she stayed awake, thinking of Emma's future. She knew this was her moment to fight for the life they both deserved. She had to be strong, not just for her, but for Emma. The courtroom session stretched on, but Rachel stayed focused. She held her breath as the judge asked Rachel to testify. She was terrified of reliving the past, but she knew this was the moment that could change everything. Rachel's voice quivered as she spoke, but she was resolute. "I've done everything for my daughter. I've given up everything to keep her safe, and I will do whatever it takes to protect her," she said. The judge nodded, taking in her words. Rachel's heart beat louder, but for the first time she felt in control. Rachel left the courtroom feeling exhausted but proud. Her lawyer had been optimistic, and now all they could do was wait. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but Rachel stayed strong for Emma. When the verdict finally arrived, Rachel was overwhelmed by the relief that washed over her. She had won. Emma would stay with her. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a moment of redemption. Rachel had fought for her daughter's future, and had come out on top. Rachel and Emma celebrated their victory quietly, just the two of them, in their apartment. They spent the evening watching movies, eating pizza, and laughing together. For the first time in a long while, Rachel felt the weight of her struggles lift. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she and Emma were stronger than ever. She had fought for her daughter, and that was all that mattered. That night, as Rachel tucked Emma into bed, she whispered, "We did it. We made it through." Emma hugged her tightly and said, "I knew you could do it, Mom." Rachel smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. As she left the room, she stood at the door for a moment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. Rachel knew the journey wasn't over, but it had become clear that no matter the challenges ahead, they would face them together.